Yellen Ross never once lifted his fists, not when he was pushed, laughed at, or even humiliated in front of everyone. But when he finally made a quiet call to his father, a man with the quiet calm of a retired Green Beret, sniper, everything began to shift. Some kids step into a new school and find friends by lunchtime, but Yellen, he wasn't one of them. At 13 he already had that look, the kind that made adults say he was mature for his age. He didn't talk much, kept to himself, and there was that sketchbook, the one he carried like it held something sacred, while other boys shouted football scores or pulled dumb hallway pranks. Yellen sat at lunch by himself, quietly sketching in the corner of a comic strip he'd been building since the year started. He never asked to transfer to Westwood Middle School in Clearwater, Florida. His mom had gotten a job at the county hospital, and they moved. His dad, Yellen, didn't mention him much, not because he was ashamed, just because people asked too many questions. And Yellen didn't like answering them. The first few weeks at Westwood were uneventful. Kids stared a bit too long. Teachers called his name like they weren't sure how to pronounce it, even though it wasn't difficult, but nothing truly happened. Not until Bryce Mallory arrived. Bryce was one of those kids who could take over a room just by walking in, loud, confident, surrounded by too many friends who laughed too hard at things that weren't even funny. His dad owned a chain of auto shops and donated fresh football jerseys every season. That meant Bryce got special treatment from the staff, and he knew it. At first, Bryce's teasing seemed harmless. He flicked the back of Jalen's ear in the lunch line. "You drawing flowers in there? Or your feelings?" He snickered. Yellen didn't reply. Didn't even glance up. That's what his dad always said. Don't feed it. Words don't weigh much unless you choose to carry them. His father once told him while showing him how to sharpen a blade. Yellen remembered that, but Bryce didn't like silence. He took it as a challenge, and so, things escalated. By the second week, Bryce had started calling him lame. He even snatched the sketchbook one day and flipped through it like it belonged to him. Superheroes. What, you think you're gonna be Marvel one day? Yellen said nothing, just calmly retrieved the book, turned away, and walked off. That set Bryce off. It wasn't fear that frustrated him, it was being ignored, and bullies hate being ignored. One Monday morning, Yellen was running late. As he walked past Bryce's locker, the door suddenly slammed right into his shoulder. "Watch it, Picasso," Bryce laughed, high-fiving his friends. Yellen bit the inside of his cheek and kept walking. A school counselor had once told him people like Bryce act out from their own insecurities. That sounded like an excuse. Yellen didn't care what was wrong with Bryce. He just wanted to be left alone. He hadn't told his parents. Not because he was scared, but because he didn't want to worry them. His mom worked 12-hour shifts. His dad, well, he was different. Derek Ross didn't yell. He didn't command attention. But when he entered a room, people straightened up. Even Jelane's teachers at his last school, the ones who didn't know his background, somehow instinctively gave him space. Jalen, new bits and pieces. Green Beret, Special Forces, honorably discharged. But the details were always vague. No stories over dinner. Just a man with a stillness that felt like a warning. So Yellen handled it himself. He drew more, kept his head down, changed routes between classes. But the more he tried to disappear, the more Bryce made sure he couldn't, and Jalen's silence was starting to fray. The week after the locker slam, Yellen stopped eating in the cafeteria. Instead, he slipped into the library once the bell rang and ate a peanut butter sandwich behind a tall stack of books. It wasn't much, but it gave him 30 minutes of peace. A place where Bryce couldn't find him, or so he thought. By Thursday, Bryce was already waiting outside the library. "You hiding now?" he asked, arms crossed. "Didn't know we had a bookworm in our grade?" Jalone didn't respond. He simply walked past. But that afternoon he returned to find his locker wide open. His sketchbook was gone. Heart racing, he scanned the hallway. Then he saw Bryce, standing across the corridor, holding it like a prize. "Y'all wanna see diary?" Bryce called out, flipping through the pages. "Look," he drew himself with muscles, like he's some kind of ninja or something. Laughter exploded, louder than anything Yellen had ever felt. It rang in his ears. His chest burned. Walked toward Bryce, fists clenched but still at his sides. "Give it back." Bryce lifted the book higher. "Say please." Yellen looked him in the eye. "It's mine. You know that." For a second, Bryce's smirk twitched. Like Jalen's calmness irritated him more than anything else. Then Bryce dropped the book and stepped on it. Jalen. Didn't shout, didn't cry. He picked it up, brushed off the dirt, and walked away. That night, Yellen said little at dinner. His mom didn't notice, too exhausted. His dad was reviewing blueprints at the table. He'd started doing part-time carpentry work since retiring. No one asked questions, and Yellen didn't offer any. Then he tapped a single contact. "Dad." The phone rang once, then again. A voice answered low. Steady. Jalen's voice held firm. "I need you to come." There was a pause. Just half a second. "Where are you?" "By the gym." "I'm on my way." Click. That was it. Yellen didn't even glance at Bryce. He put his phone away and slung his bag over his shoulder. Bryce blinked. "Throne? That's it. You think calling your daddy is gonna save you? He laughed dryly. What's he gonna do? Draw a cartoon? And erase me? Yalan didn't blink. That silence. It made Bryce burn hotter. He stepped closer, eyes narrowed. You think I'm scared of your dad? Yalan held his gaze for one long moment. You should be. The grin faded from Bryce's face. And just like that, nothing else happened. Jalen turned and walked away. That night, dinner was quiet again. Jalen's mom was working late, just him and his dad tonight. Derek was fiddling with a cabinet drawer in the kitchen, but his eyes kept drifting toward his son. You good? He asked. Jalen gave a small nod, but Derek didn't buy it. He stepped over to the table and sat across from him. You called me today. Yolan hesitated, then nodded again. He hit me. Derek leaned back. No flinch, no clenched fists, just stillness. Same kid? Yeah. Derek looked down for a beat, then he asked, what do you want me to do? Yalan didn't expect the question. I don't know. You want me to talk to the school? They won't do anything, Yalan muttered. Derek nodded slowly. Then he stood, walked to the counter, and picked up his keys. Then I'll go tomorrow. Yalan looked up. What are you gonna say? Derek shrugged on his jacket. His voice was calm, like it was just another weekend errand. Whatever I need to. Yalan watched him, not sure if he felt anxious or relieved, but one thing he did know, something was about to change. And not just for him, because when Derek Ross walks into a room, people don't talk, they listen. Half-awake students dragging backpacks, the smell of reheated tater tots drifting from the cafeteria, crackling intercom announcements no one really listened to. Teachers took attendance with barely a glance up from their screens, but by 9:15, something shifted. Derek Ross had arrived. No raised voice, no slamming doors, no scene. Just a man walking in jeans, black shirt, weathered jacket. Nothing about him screamed authority. But when he stepped to the front desk, the receptionist straightened before he even spoke. Good morning, he said, politely. I'd like to speak with Principal Langston. I'm Yolan Ross's father. The woman blinked. He's in a meeting right now. Derek didn't argue, didn't frown. He simply said, I'll wait. She lifted the phone. Yes, there's a parent. Here, yes, Derek Ross. About his son. Pause. He'll be right out. A few minutes later, Principal Langston appeared. Silver hair. Crisp suit. A smile rehearsed too many times. Mr. Ross, sorry to keep you waiting. Please, come with me. Derek followed without a word. Inside the office, Langston gestured toward a chair. Please, how can I help? Derek remained standing. My son's been targeted by another student. Over and over. I'm here to find out why that's been allowed to happen. Langston cleared his throat. We take bullying very seriously at Westwood. Derek raised an eyebrow. Do you? Langston shifted. Well, we can't control every interaction between students. I'm not asking you to control them, Derek said, calm as ice. I'm asking why your staff didn't intervene. Why a kid was humiliated in your classrooms, attacked in your halls, and assaulted outside your gym. He paused. There were videos? Langston opened his mouth, then shut it. You're lucky I'm not here as the man I used to be, Derek said. You wouldn't like how that conversation went. Langston blinked. I'm here as a father, Derek continued. But I didn't come to be managed. I came to be heard. Silence. Langston nodded slowly. What would you like us to do? Derek paused. Where is Bryce Mallory right now? Langston hesitated. In homeroom. I'd like to speak with him. That's not typically allowed. I won't touch him. Won't threaten him. I just want a word. You can be present if you'd like. Langston opened his mouth to object again, but something in Derek's voice made it impossible. 10 minutes later, Derek stood in a small side room near the gym. Bryce was let in, arms folded, feet dragging, smug as ever. You Jalame's dad, he snorted. Derek didn't blink. I'm his father, and you can sit. Bryce didn't move. Then, for some reason even he didn't understand, he sat. Langston stood stiff in the corner. Silent, Derek took a seat across. From the boy, his voice never changed. Same calm tone as the front desk. You don't know me, Bryce, but here's one fact. I spent 15 years in special forces, 8 of them in combat. I've shared rooms with men twice your size, and some of them didn't walk out. He looked Bryce dead in the eye. So if your plan is to scare me, you'll need another strategy. The smirk cracked us slightly. Not here to yell, Derek said. I'm not even angry. I'm here because you put your hands on my son. You disrespected him, and no one stopped you. He leaned in. That ends today. The room fell into a silence so thick, it seemed to muffle every breath. Bryce squinted, pretending he didn't care, but his leg bounced beneath the table. Derek leaned back. Ever ask yourself why you do what you do? Bryce scoffed. What's that mean? Why go after kids smaller than you? Why make people laugh to feel big? Bryce shrugged. He's weird, always drawing, doesn't talk to anyone, and that bothers you. Bryce opened his mouth, then closed it. I've met men like you before, Derek said. Not boys, men in war zones. Same look, same grin, same shaky knees when it mattered. Bryce glanced at Langston. Is this supposed to scare me? No. Derek's voice didn't waver. It's meant to teach you something before life does it, in a way you can't undo. Langston was still silent now, more listener than supervisor. Derek leaned in again. His voice dropped slightly. When I was your age, I watched a kid like you bully my cousin every day. Until one day, my cousin hit back. He didn't know how to fight, got jumped. Concussion. Hospital. Derek paused. You know where that bully is now? Bryce didn't answer. Prison. Assault. Never learned when to stop. And the world doesn't keep forgiving that. He tapped the table softly. What you've done to Yalanet won't be forgotten. Not by him, not by me. He leaned closer. And if you don't stop now, someday you'll pick the wrong kid. One who doesn't walk away. Bryce finally looked up. There was no threat in Derek's eyes. No sermon, just truth. You think strength is about who people fear, Derek said. Real strength is how you carry yourself when no one's watching. Bryce looked away. I'm not raising my voice. I'm not touching you. Because my son needs to see that men handle problems without violence, especially when they've had enough of it. The silence settled again. Derek stood at him. Expect you to apologize. But I expect you to think about everything I just said. Because if you ever lay another hand on my son, his tone sharpened just a hair. Our next conversation won't happen in the school office. Langston finally stirred. Mr. Ross, no threats. Just facts. Derek looked at Bryce. Be better than the men who raised you, or you'll become them. And with that Derek walked out. Richard stood at the edge of the grave, wind tugging at the corners of his coat, as if even nature wasn't ready to let go. Beside him, Deshaun held Ilya's small hand tightly in his own. None of them said anything for a while. They didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was full of everything they had carried here. Grief, hope, the long weight of memories that could no longer be touched but would always be felt. Ilya looked up at the men, her little voice, barely above a whisper. She was really brave, wasn't she? Her eyes shimmered but held no tears. Just quiet understanding beyond her years. Richard nodded slowly, voice gravel-thick. Yeah, she was the bravest person I ever knew. Deshaun swallowed hard, his other hand clenching as if holding on to something invisible. She didn't give up, not when it mattered. The stone bore Allison's name now. Clean letters, sharp, unchanging. But their hearts carried her different blind life, breathing in their choices and every forward step they now had to take without her image prompt. A solemn graveside scene at sunset, with a suited older black man, a tall younger black man, and a little girl holding hands. The wind lightly rustles their clothes as they stand before a gravestone etched with the name Allison. Realistic style, cinematic lighting, 4K. They didn't stay long. There was no performance of sorrow, no drawn-out goodbyes, just a final moment. Of presence, of standing still for someone who had stood for so many. As they turned to leave, Deshaun felt Ilya tighten her grip on his hand, grounding him. Richard moved with a slight limpage or emotion. No one could say, but he walked with a quiet kind of pride, not because the pain had vanished, but because it had purpose now. Outside the cemetery gate, the noise of the world crept back in distant cars. A barking dog, wind shuffling through trees. But something inside all three of them had shifted, a decision made in silence. To keep going, to live in a way that honored the fight Allison never abandoned. Image prompt. 3 figures walking away from a cemetery gate. A young girl in a denim jacket, a tall man in a black coat holding her hand, and an older man slightly behind them. Their faces are unreadable but strong. The sun sets behind, casting a golden glow, realistic and cinematic style. Flashbacks weren't planned. They came like old songs drifting into a room uninvited. Deshaun found himself back in that hospital corridor staring at the flicker of a heart monitor, hearing Allison's voice telling him not to stop speaking up. He doubted his worth, doubted the system could change, but she never did. Richard remembered the day she first joined the academy, the way she straightened her posture, smiled nervously, and said, "Sir, I'll earn my place." He hadn't believed her then. Now he carried that shame in every breath, but also a strange peace, knowing she had proved him wrong. In Ilya she remembered warm hands, late night stories, and a lullaby sung off-key but full of love. That memory would be her inheritance, more powerful than money or medals. Image prompt, montage-style frame, a hospital hallway with flickering lights, a young black woman in uniform at the police academy, and a living room with a mother singing softly to her daughter. Emotional tone, realistic details, soft cinematic blur. The next weeks were different, not louder, not dramatic, just steady. Richard began speaking at local town halls, sharing truths he once buried, not shouting, just telling. Sometimes that was louder. Deshaun returned to the construction site not to tear anyone down but to build differently. He promoted voices that had once been silenced. People noticed, slowly, but they did. In Ilya, she drew pictures, bright ones. Her favorite was a sketch of her mom wearing a cape, standing in front of a courthouse with the words, "Mom changed things." Image prompt. A community town hall meeting with a distinguished black man speaking calmly to a small crowd. In another panel, a construction site with a young black man giving instructions while workers nod respectfully. Finally, a child's drawing of a caped woman in front of a courthouse. Soft, emotional realism. No one said, "Allison saved the world," But she changed the people who would, and that was enough. As the camera pulls back, metaphorically or not, scene widens. A city waking up, voices rising, laws shifting, and people remembering, not just her sacrifice, but what she stood for. And somewhere in that wide frame, 3 people walk forward, not untouched by pain, but not broken by it either. Together, *justice didn't come all at once, but it started with a name they couldn't forget.